Spelljammer was recently announced by Wizards of the Coast, and it has definitely been a fan favorite for the Dungeons & Dragons setting. But how does it compare to other sci-fi fantasy settings, and should we be as excited for it? Now, when Wizards dropped the trailer for Spelljammer, I was impressed. I was very impressed. The art is amazing. It's very evocative for the setting. I was excited to see another take on a science fantasy setting. The trailer gave me shivers. And the more I started watching it, the more I started thinking about Starfinder and things that I could already do in the Starfinder universe that Spelljammer is offering. Now, the main draw here is going to be exploring space in a cool and unique way, visiting far and distant lands. In the Spelljammer case, you're visiting different D&D universes or different D&D worlds. In Starfinder, it's just one universe with many worlds in it, and you can make them whatever you want. And while the ideas may be very similar, the execution is very different. So let's talk about some of the differences between Spelljammer and Starfinder. If you haven't seen me before, my name's Nathaniel. I talk about role-playing games and lore around the World of Darkness setting and the Paizoverse. Starting off with Spelljammer, each universe is housed within a crystal sphere, or a crystal bubble, if you will. Inside this sphere, you will find a specific D&D universe. The Forgotten Realms, Eberron, presumably Tal'Dorei from Critical Role. All of these universes have their own planets, their own planes of existence. There may be multiple planets inside these spheres. In the second edition of Spelljammer, these spheres floated in a almost liquid-like substance called the phlogiston. It's not actually water, but it functions a little bit like that, and the spheres float in it, and they could go to different places, thus making travel between spheres a little difficult. Fun fact about phlogiston, it's also extremely flammable. So no flames, no fire magic, that's very, very bad. My understanding of what we know from Spelljammer is that in the 5e setting, the phlogiston will be changed or maybe non-existent anymore. But wild space will still exist. Wild space is what we think of as space. When you're inside the sphere, the emptiness, the black, the space is referred to as wild space. Now, in regards to magic, when it comes to Spelljammer, when you are outside of your crystal, certain magics just will not work. More of the magics that are powered by divination, powered by gods or faith, they tend to not work outside of the spheres. When you are in the phlogiston, your connection to your god is completely severed, and that's why your magic doesn't work. Arcane magic still will. And when you return to a crystal sphere or go back into one, your connection to your god may be restored because they may exist within that sphere, or they may have a different name, or maybe they don't exist and then you still are without your magic. This concept of realms and realities is an interesting take for a fantasy and a sci-fi setting. In Starfinder, space is just space. When you travel to different planets or to different galaxies within Starfinder, your spaceship uses thrusters to get there. It would take you a really long time to get to a new galaxy if you did it this way, but there are faster ways of travel. Some engines allow ships to travel to a different plane of existence and pop back into the material one. Some remnants of old technology like fold gates. With a fold gate, you start here and you want to go here, and space just kind of folds together for you and then unfolds. But the most common way that ships travel is through the drift. The drift would be the closest analogy to the phlogiston, but it's not the same. The drift is an entirely new plane of existence that was created by the merging of three gods into one supercomputer intelligent god. They created the drift and blasted a signal across the universe, and in this signal, they had instructions on how to get into this new plane and use it for travel. Triune, the new god, wanted space travel for some unknown reason to be easier. When you travel in the drift, it's not the same as traveling in the material plane. Just because you've moved a distance in the drift doesn't mean it's the same distance in the material plane. It could be hundreds of thousands of light years apart. Magic cannot get you into the drift, it cannot get you out of the drift, but it can be used in the drift. Magic in Starfinder isn't typically powered by faith or a specific connection to a god, but when you're in the drift, your connection to your god isn't severed. They just can't get you there. So if distances are inconsistent, how do ships get around? They lock onto something called a drift beacon. This sends out a signal that ships can lock onto, and they will go towards that signal. The bigger and stronger the beacon, the easier it is to find and locate and actually get there. Compared to the phlogiston of Spelljammer, travel in the phlogiston is more akin to sailing on the river or sailing on the seas. There are currents, and they will direct you to the different spheres, and most of them have been mapped out in a general area, even though sometimes they can move. In Starfinder, the most powerful drift beacon can be found at the home of the main setting, Absalom Station. Anyone who has the ability to lock onto and track a drift beacon from anywhere in the universe can get to Absalom Station within 6 days, no matter where you are in the universe. Before we move on to talking about the differences between how space is handled between the two systems, as well as ships and playable races, if you are enjoying today's video, please hit the thumbs up button to let me know that you're enjoying this. And if you'd like to see more lore videos around your favorite RPG games, then please hit subscribe with the bell notification. In Spelljammer, your starships are open to space. It's literally just a pirate ship with sails. It's kind of cool. But the way they handled this was actually based in some real science. Every object that has mass has the ability to put an environment around it with air that you can breathe. The bigger you are, the bigger your bubble of air will be. And while as a person they are big and they have mass, if you get lost in space, your bubble's not going to last you very long. And a standard environmental bubble typically lasts around 3 months. Gravity kind of works the same way in Spelljammer as well. If an object has mass, it has gravity, and gravity pulls towards the center of the object. So no matter where you're standing on it, you will always be pulled to the middle. This means if you really wanted to, you could just walk around, literally around your ship. Starfinder went for a more pseudoscience approach. Because it's a sci-fi setting with fantasy, technology is very prevalent. Masks, respirators, portable oxygen tanks, these things are very common and very easy to come by. It's basically standard equipment for spacefaring adventurers. There are even spells that allow you to generate your own environment. Now, these can also be found within Spelljammer as well. For Starfinders, your ships come standard issue with gravity generators. If this goes out because somebody turned it off, or you're in a space combat and it gets damaged, you will just be floating in space. And even if you decide to go for a spacewalk, moving around in the vastness or the emptiness of space is still somewhat easy to do. Jetpacks, rocket boosters, these are all examples of technology that's very easy to come by. Though when the gravity goes out and you don't have your jetpack with you, well, that's a bit of a trick. When it comes to ship design between these two settings, Spelljammer and Starfinder, both have oodles of flavor. In Spelljammer, you have ships that differ based on the race that built them. And this would make sense that architecturally, they would just be different. The ships that travel through space are called Spelljammers. That's just a noun to describe them, but the Spelljammer is a very mythical ship within the setting. All ships within Spelljammer have sails that allow them to move through the phlogiston. And these sails even work within a planet's atmosphere, although they're not able to go as fast in the planet's atmosphere as they can in space. The main source of power for Spelljammers is the helm, and they can only be captained, piloted by a magical user. These helms, they harness magical energy and turn it into motive power. Starfinder went for a more Star Trek approach. Your ship has engines, and those engines power you to get where you want to go, but there are many variations or many versions of engines that you can have. When it comes to ship customization, I'm not exactly sure how Spelljammer is going to stack up. I do know that with Starfinder, your ships are extremely customizable. The whole purpose of getting a ship in Starfinder is that is your mobile base. You move it around wherever you want to go. You customize it how your adventuring group wants it to be. I would presume that Spelljammer would adapt the same type of approach. However, with Starfinder, you don't need a magical person on board to get your ship to go where you want it to go. You just need a good pilot. Alternatively, you don't need someone who's good with computers if you have a magic user. So computers, instead of scanning a ship, you divine things about your enemy, or about the ship that you're trying to gain information on. It also works on planets as well. One thing that I don't think Spelljammer is going to include within the 3 books that they're releasing is an option for large-scale naval battles. Now, Starfinder did do something around this. Not everyone is going to use this because not everyone wants to be an admiral and control hundreds of ships. But it's just nice to know that if you wanted this option, rules around this mechanism or around this mechanic exist within Starfinder. I'm sure if you really wanted to do this, that the rules around large-scale naval battles would be adaptable to the Spelljammer setting fairly easily. So here's where I'm at with the Starjammer announcement. The setting and the art look absolutely amazing. It's very Treasure Planet-esque. Or maybe it's the other way around because Spelljammer came out before Treasure Planet. I'm not as excited about it coming out as a 3-book release. Each of these books are going to be in the 60-page range, and for the price that Wizards is asking for, I think that's a bit much, even though you do get the GM screen and a map of one of the main cities or the main settings within Starjammer. In comparison, one book released from Paizo is the same or near the same page count as Wizards is asking for 3, and Paizo asks less money for them. The Spelljammer setting does have at least 10 unique races to them, but some of those races are just reskinned from the traditional tropes of Dungeons & Dragons, at least as far as my understanding of them goes. In comparison to Starfinder, which has a more cohesive universe, there are literally hundreds of playable races and hundreds of monsters. And I know that one of the books for Spelljammers will contain new and interesting monsters as well, but I feel that Paizo's race customization just offers far more. Fans of D&D, I'm sure, are going to be very excited for the setting, and if you were interested in the original 2nd edition Spelljammer setting, I'm sure you're going to have a blast with this one. For myself, it's not on a must-have list yet. It definitely would be cool and a nice thing to have, but it's not a must-have for me. Personally, I feel that taking the Spelljammer setting and applying it onto Starfinder would be much easier than trying to go the other way around. But let me know in the comments what you think. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about Starfinder and one of the main settings around there, I have a video on the screen for you now. Thank you to all of my supporters on Patreon. My name's Nathaniel. Thanks for stopping by, everyone.